I'm going to declare a quorum and call the City of Groton Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, August 26, 2019 to order. Clerk Patrick, please call the roll.
Present are Mayor Keith Hedrick, Deputy Mayor Jamal Beckford, Councilors Lisa McCabe, Reginald Stanford, and Rashad Carter, Finance Director Ron Uhas, Clerk Deborah Patrick. Excused are Councilors Guinevere Depot and Minerva Ortiz.
I just received a text from Councilor Ortiz. She will be here soon. I received a text earlier from Councilor Depot, and she is stuck in traffic. She's been in traffic for 2 hours. She was 90 minutes away at that time, so she's doing the best that she can to be here, but she may or may not make it. All right, so the first item that we're going to review is number 392, which is a review of City of Groton non-union handbooks, change the pension and medical plan. Linda, if I can get you and Chris and Bruce to come up, we'll need to get you some chairs, and we'll need to get you the microphone so that you can be heard. Also, to council, I want to remind you that your microphones are directional, so therefore speak up and speak into the microphones so that we are captured. Sometimes we don't do that. Also, I want to remind council to follow Robert's Rules of Order and to address me as the chair and not get into discussions with other members, other councilors, and also with guests and commentators. All right? Okay. So where do we want to start? Linda, is there anything you want to say before we start, or you just want me to go ahead and introduce?
Go ahead.
Okay. I want to introduce Bruce Barth, and he will provide his background and some information on who he is, but he is going to speak to you today to talk about the cash balance plan. This is a non-union discussion. The cash balance plan is intended to be for the non-union and the union, but we're going to talk about the non-union applicability of it, because the way the cash balance plan works is it works the same across the board. And with that, well, I also have Chris Hodgson here and Linda's here. Chris is here to add some identifying information based on the questions that you may ask during this presentation. Bruce, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Bruce Barth. I'm an attorney at Robinson & Cole in Hartford. I practice in the employee benefits area and have been practicing in that area, unfortunately, almost 40 years. I represent a number of municipalities in the state of Connecticut with respect to their pension benefits, and have been involved in doing that for the whole time that I've been at my current law firm, which is just about 35 years. What I'd like to first start with is talking about a comparison, which I think the mayor has handed out to everyone that I prepared.
Did everybody get this sheet? Mm-hmm. This is the comparison of retirement plan designs.
So basically, there are 3 types of designs we'll talk about. One of which is what you currently have for most or all of your employees, which is a defined benefit plan where the benefit is based on your final average pay in your years of service. That's known as a final average pay defined benefit plan. So when you retire, you get a benefit based with a multiplier times your years of service times your final average compensation over, let's say, your last 5 years. It may vary by group, but that's a fairly normal type of benefit. There is also what's called a career average defined benefit plan. In a career average defined benefit plan, basically each year you earn a benefit based on your compensation for that year times a multiplier. And those building blocks then add up over your career, so when you retire you have all of those blocks. Not based on final average pay, it's based on your compensation in the year you earn it. And that's called a career average plan. You do not have a career average plan, but it's relevant to understand what one is and how it compares to a final average pay plan for the reasons I'm going to get to in a moment. Another type of defined benefit plan is a cash balance plan. A cash balance plan is a defined benefit plan, so your benefit is defined. And under a cash balance plan, it is basically a career average plan. It's identical to a career average plan, but with one big proviso. Each year, that pay credit that you get, let's say it's 5% of pay times times your year compensation for that year. That each year thereafter gets an interest credit on top of it. So instead of a career average plan where the building blocks just add up, here you have a building block that grows each year as you serve. So it looks like a final average pay plan to some degree when you retire, because it's based on the interest credits attached to that benefit. And in some cases, your benefit could be far more valuable than a final average pay plan. In others, it might be less. It's especially good for shorter service employees because they're doing far better than in any other type of plan. But it can be good for longer service employees depending on how those interest credits add up. So that's a career average plan. So it's still a defined benefit plan. So all the money is in a bucket. You pay out the benefits from that bucket. The people are entitled to their benefit regardless of how much is in the bucket. If there's a shortfall, it has to be funded somehow, usually through the city making up greater contributions. Also out there is a defined contribution plan, and a lot of people say a cash balance plan is a defined contribution plan. It is not. A defined contribution plan is your 401k plan. You have an account, however you invest it is what you get. When you retire, you get whatever is in the account regardless of anything else. And that's based on contributions each year and then how it's invested. So if the market does well, you may do well. If the market does poorly, you may do poorly. Okay? So what are the benefits of these types of plans? In a final average pay plan, it's that you have a set benefit formula that's determined when you retire. The risk is that you don't know how the investments are going to perform in the fund, so the city is always at risk of underfunding the plan, especially if there's a series of bad market years. For instance, in the 2008-2009 timeframe, the market did very poorly, obviously. And although you actuarially smooth the gains and losses in that type of plan, you may still end up with a significant shortfall. It's my understanding that the city's plan right now is about 95% funded, which puts it in the better plans in the state. It's a good thing. There are a few plans that are over 100% funded. Those are in great shape, but you're in good shape compared to some plans that are funded. I think there's one plan that's completely unfunded in the state. So it's zero. They have to pay benefits from. Cash balance plan would be the same thing. The one difference with a cash balance plan is because the interest credits are based on something. They can be based on a bond rate. They can be based on a market rate of return rate. They can be based on whatever you want it to base it on. But because of that, it's more predictable what the contributions are going to be necessary to fund that benefit because you're tracking the market or tracking what you're investing in there. So there's not the variation that you see in a typical final average pay defined benefit plan. So there is less risk that there is a shortfall at the end of the day. And then defined contribution plan, since you're getting the account what it is, there's no risk except on the employee not performing, the plan not performing as it should be. In the other two cases, the risk is always on the employer. With that, I think that summarizes the types of plans and how they compare. I'm happy to answer any questions or talk about any issues that you may have concerning those plans or the proposal to change the non-union plan for new hires.
I have a question. So do we know how we propose to link these interest credits? Is it a fixed rate? Is it a fixed 3%? Is it a...
The current was a floor of 0 with a cap with a 10, based on the market was the original proposal, but that was still to kind of be going over. I believe that's where we were at with these plan designs we did.
Right, that was the initial design that I've seen.
Okay. And that's where it still stands?
Correct.
So will it be based, I'm sorry, do I have to ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead. What's your question?
My question is, if it's linked to an index-based fund, how does that work when you compare to when it's linked to an index-based fund, how is that as opposed to coming from the pool of money and how the whole retirement fund does? So do you just say that, how does that work, Bruce? I'm not quite sure.
Well, you have two options with respect to this plan in terms of how you structure it from the beginning. One, you can have it be a completely separate plan, completely separate fund. And so whatever the fund performance is, if you decide you're going to link it to how the fund performs on the investment side, you could do that. That's one option. That's a more expensive option because you have a second plan to administer. Different investment, it may have different investments. You have to pay investment fees, trust fees, et cetera. So it's more expensive to have the plan separate than be part of your current defined benefit plan. If the cash balance piece is part of your current defined benefit plan, you can either link the rates of return or the interest credits to the fund performance if you want, or you could have it as a fixed rate tied to some bond index, for instance, which is fairly common, plus maybe some additional amount. And then you could structure the investments so they tie into that. And you could do that for only a portion of the fund if you want. You could bifurcate the fund on investments and still be one fund if you wanted to go down that road to lower the risk, which is the sole purpose of this type of a plan.
Did that answer your question?
It answers my question.
Okay.
What kind of a risk do you see with a plan that's 95% funded?
Same risk you would see with any defined benefit plan. If we have a huge market swings, which is very possible, we certainly have seen that enough in the last couple of weeks on a daily basis. If the fund moves that much, and the funding, remember, is always based on the first day of the year or the last day of the year. So you determine at a snapshot on that date. If there's a huge swing just before that point, your plans could go from 95 to 85% funded just like that, because it's based on that snapshot date. And that does happen.
But that could happen with a DB plan.
That's what I'm talking about with a DB plan.
Mm-hmm.
Could happen with any plan, but it's more likely with a DB plan, and there the risk falls solely on the city. If your interest credits, even let's say that you have a floor of 0, you almost always have a floor of 0, by the way. Sometimes you have floors that are higher than that, if you want to guarantee a certain rate of return. In that case, the benefit's not going to be adversely affected, and because of your investments will probably be more conservative, the risk of having that kind of a fluctuation in the funding status is much lower.
No questions?
I have a question.
Councilman King?
With the cash balance plan, is there going to be a city match to that? And if so, what's the percentile?
There's not a match. What it is there are pay credits each year that you receive. And that has nothing to do with how much the employee contributes or how much the city contributes. They're just a pay credit. The pay credit may look very similar to the total of the employee and city contribution, but it may not be identical. So it's not really a match.
Okay.
It's just there's monies going into the plan that's almost guaranteed going in. Let's say, I'm just picking a number with a plan design. Let's say it's 4% employee, 4% city. If that was the case, then those are the amounts that would go in the plan, and if the pay credit is 8%, it happens to equate to those two amounts.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean that's what's going to go in the plan. The plan design, I believe, is designed as, 8% right now, correct?
4% from the city.
And 4% from the employee, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the defined benefit.
Yeah,
That's there.
that's the pay credit.
That's the pay credit. Now, any other questions or comments? There were some questions there were some concerns and questions brought up about what are other people doing? Do you want to talk about where municipalities are and where they're going, and 401Ks and why some 401Ks have failed and those kind of things? Do you have information on that?
I can give you some.
Okay.
I represent, oh, yes.
I just
Councilman
want to
Carter?
correct something that you said. I don't think we had a question on what other cities are doing. I think our question was, what were the reasons that other cities have done this and gone back, which is two separate questions.
Okay, I can cover both if you'd
I don't
like.
think, we're
Yeah.
concerned about where
All
other
right.
cities are
Well,
going.
just so you know, by way of background, there are some municipalities that have only had a defined contribution plan, like a 401K plan. They've never had a defined benefit plan. Those are the minority, but there are some that have done that. There are some, and I, by the way, represent employers in all categories. There's several who have had defined benefit plans, stopped them from new hires, gone to a defined contribution plan because lower the risk. There's at least one that's then gone back to a defined benefit plan for new hires. There is another group that has had a defined benefit plan and then added a cash balance component for new hires. That's a small group at this point in time, but from what I'm gathering, it appears to be growing. And then there are a number of municipalities that have only had a defined benefit plan. The reasons why they've had these changes one way or the other, one is for public safety employees, police and fire principally, you have statutorily mandated disability benefits, which the best place to provide them is in a pension plan, defined benefit plan. So for those municipalities that don't have a defined benefit plan or that have left a defined benefit plan to offer those benefits, they've had to go out and get disability insurance to be able to provide those benefits. They found that to be more costly. But that's only in the public safety area where you have guaranteed statutorily required benefits. Where you don't have statutorily required benefits, most of those employers have made changes, one, to lower the risk and possibly lower the long-term cost. If there's less risk, there's less cost.
There was an example given from New London. New London had a 401K for the fire department only. And then 17 years later, they went back to a defined benefit plan. So as a 401K, it wasn't a cash balance plan. There was a reference in one letter that you received to Madison. We couldn't find anything in Madison, but in Brantford, the police were the ones that went from a defined contribution rather, back to a defined benefit, right? They're the ones?
Yeah, just kind of a quick clarification for London.
Okay.
The police, the fire, and the public works are in MERS, which is a municipal employee retirement system, which is a defined benefit. The municipal employee union and the non-union or unaffiliated group is in a 401K. But it was the police or the fire rather, that went into the 401K type. Then when police went to MERS, they wanted to follow suit and go into MERS, is what I've been told. I don't know the.
And since I have signed when I signed the fire, right, today?
Correct.
Okay, so since I've signed fire, I can talk about it. We, at one point, were talking about the cash balance plan with the fire department, and we looked at our actuarial tables, and the president of the union, Dan Tompkins, brought up that for the fire department, because they don't get Social Security, this was not a good plan for them. So I took it off the table. I took it off the table and said, we'll do some negotiations here, we'll move forward for 2 years. The police, we could not touch pension this year, it was locked out. So in 2 years, we will talk about police and fire pensions. In that time, my direction has been, we have 2 years to find a pension plan for police and fire that will work for both the employees and recognize the service that they give and still be good for the taxpayers, so it's not harmful to the taxpayers. Another benefit that I see to the cash balance plan is that when an individual retires, they can either take money and go invest it somewhere, or they can take the annuity and continue to draw. But what happens is there is no additional tax burden on the taxpayer, right? We're done. There's no more payment. Whereas now, with the defined benefit plan, you pay until death do us part. And that's the way it is. Now, in doing research for tonight's meeting, one of the things that we identified is that in 5 of the 8 unions that we have, they have a cap of 30 years. And what that means is, after 30 years, they don't have to pay into the pension. I have employees here that are not yet retired and have over 40 years. We had somebody that retired a couple years ago that had 50 years in. So he stopped paying into the pension at 30 years. So from 30 to 50, his salary went up and his retirement is based on the top 3 years. And yet he wasn't paying into it. This will help that as well. So that's another challenge that we have, and people that are concerned about downturn in the economy, that is always a concern that we have, and yet we don't worry about people not paying into the pension after X amount of time. So that's just one of the things that I wanted to bring out.
So,
Deputy Mayor Beckford.
thank you. Ms. Abedizian, so where is this going? Do we know like how many municipalities are moving to this? Is this something that, I don't know if you have that kind of
I
information.
don't have that information.
Okay.
We,
Chris,
just sort of anecdotal.
Sure, maybe
Chris, is
anybody at
this
the
something
table.
where you can help?
I've negotiated in the last 10 years a significant number of different pensions for new hires, mostly the 401. Cash balance to me seemed more of a private sector initiative, but it seemed very creative in that it is still a defined benefit plan, but it provides for a disability benefit. So I thought, to me, negotiating with the unions, I said, this actually is something that is better to talk about than just a 401. So I thought it would be advantageous to the union. And it still provides a good benefit, and there's savings to the city.
Honestly speaking, if we're looking at numbers, you have defined benefit plans, you have defined contribution plans, and there's quite a few of those out there. The numbers of cash balance plans there's literally a couple handfuls. But Bruce, when I talked to you, you said that of the ones that you manage, most of yours are private, right? I think?
Yeah, I've just, one question that I've heard a lot is, cash balance plans are all new. They're not. They've been in existence since the early 90s in the private sector. They just have not been in the public sector until the last 5 years, pretty much. They're new to the public sector. But then, as you know, a lot of things that were in the private sector eventually get to the public sector. The defined contribution plan, for instance, is one big one. So there, I've been dealing with them for years. They certainly replaced, I'd say, of the defined benefit plans that I've represented over the last 30 years, cash balance plans probably converted to cash balance plans in about 30 to 40% of the situations.
Councilor McCabe.
We've talked a lot about the cash balance plan lowering the risk to the city, which is a good thing. I just want to have a feeling that I'm not raising the risk for our employees. Is there any additional burden or risk or loss of retirement income?
You're certainly not raising the risk to employees, since to the extent there's insufficient assets to pay the benefits, the city still has a contractual obligation to do so.
Right.
So there's no additional risk to the employees. The only issue is, does the plan design equate to what a final average pay plan would be, which is what you have today. If it was
Right.
career average and the pay credits were identical to the career average benefit, I'd say it's a home run, because they're getting the interest credits on top of it. It's automatically a better benefit. In a final average pay plan, you really have to run out the numbers and look at individuals and have a number of examples. An 8% pay credit, which is what's proposed, is a pretty significant number for shorter service employees. They're always going to do better than a final average pay plan with that kind of credit. 30-year employees, if you're capping the benefit at 30 years, I don't know it's going to depend on their age, whether they're doing better or not better. For people who are longer service, as the mayor pointed out, some maybe 50 years, this kind of plan will give them a better benefit than a final average pay plan that caps benefits at 30 years. Because they're going to have all those years to accumulate benefits. They would be accumulating pay credits for all 50 years in that case. So they would do better. So you can't say anyone would do worse, but if you actuarially, you'd have to look at the numbers to see what would be projected out.
Councilor Carter?
I wasn't really gonna say anything, so I didn't wanna keep the going on, but, so, a few weeks ago, I said that there's really no real reason, in my opinion, to have this meeting, right? And I think that the questions that some of the other council members have, or have had, aren't being answered, and I'm not saying that you don't know why, but I think we all know this, right? We've read the material, we know what it is, right? And when we said, we're not gonna know the future, everything's an assumption. Even the defined benefit is an assumption, right? Am I correct? Right?
It's all based on, well, the amount in there to fund the plan is all based on actuarial assumptions. That's a defined benefit
So,
plan, that's
yep.
what it is.
So, me, like I said, well, I'm talking to you guys too, at least my opinion. What we do know now is that the fund is at 95%, right? 95% funded,
That's what I've been told.
right? And it's been that way, right? There's no indication that's gonna change. So I think that, and there's two council members here that are on here. I think why they wanted to really have this meeting was to ask, and maybe you already answered it, the cities, right? The cities that have gone, that have changed, and that have changed back. Do we know definitely that there's been cities or towns in that have done that?
Well, no one's changed to a cash balance plan and gone back.
And gone back, okay, all right. And I think that was the question that some of the council members had, because they wanted to know why. Am I correct?
Well, I think what they said was the change and went back was when it was a 401K, not a, it didn't go from a defined benefit to a cash balance and back. It went to a
Yeah,
401K and back.
Well, I didn't have that question. I'm just kind of asking for
Okay,
you guys,
but
because
they said
that's
that.
what, okay, all right. So then my second question was, all right, so, I mean, me personally, I don't really care what other cities are doing, and I think we keep referring back to other cities. I want to know what works for us, you know? And what you're telling me is that you really don't know, right? You really don't know until we get there.
You will never know.
And that's
That's
what
what an actuarial assumption is. It's
Yes.
based on reason.
and that's what I'm saying. It was the same thing 3 weeks ago when we talked about it.
But,
you know.
but I will say the one thing I can tell you from experience with the private sector, cash balance plans, the funding is much more level than it is in a regular defined benefit plan where the funding can go like this, significant ups and downs based on market performance.
I understand
That doesn't happen in a cash balance plan.
Right.
There are variations, yes. It could go like this, but it'll never go with the big swings. Like I have no instance, you talk about 95% funded, which it is today, and it's great to hear. I don't know what the funded status was in the late 2000s. It could have been significantly lower when the market had those big downturns. And my guess it probably was. But I haven't seen those actuarial
My
reports.
point in saying that is that I mean, I can go on and on, but I'm saying we're not like other cities. Okay, there's a reason why it's funded. That's what I'm saying.
And there's no reason to suspect that it wouldn't continue to be funded. We're gonna, regardless of whether we stay with the defined benefit plan or we add the cash balance plan, the city is still obligated to make sure that it's funded. I mean, this is not an attempt not to fund a pension. It's not an attempt to not provide a pension to the employees. Part of the reason for me bringing this up and looking at this is the potential cost savings for it and the fact that it's a long-term savings, 10, 15 years, 15, 20 years down the road, when the employees retire, the taxpayers are no longer on the hook for that. And there's been concern from taxpayers to me about our OPEB costs. And when you go to different budget meetings and you watch budget meetings of local municipalities, one of the concerns is about how much are we paying for pensions? And so this gives a good pension to the employees, saves some money, and it minimizes our risk. That's what I was looking to do.
So
Deputy Mayor.
I would like to reiterate a point that I made at the last meeting, which is, you know, why, they're just the unintended consequences, right? Where if you change the benefits, if you change from a pension to something that folks can take it with them when they leave, we might become a revolving door, right? We would get employees, we would train them, we would, you know, pour time into them, and they might jump ship to a place that does offer a pension, right? I mean, that's why a lot of people work in the public sector in the first place. Maybe not for a pension, but for their benefits. And so, you know, I have serious reservations about being out in front of a lot of other municipalities, and we could lose talent. And this, again, this isn't something that we would see today. We would see it in 15, 20 years. And I see the numbers here, and I see these significant numbers here. I think a total of savings of, I think it's like $1.5 million over a 20-year period. But I mean, if you do the math, you know, you figure we have 10,000 people in this, you know, the city. You do the math, that's like $15 per year, and that's not even going into, you know, the businesses that we tax that would make up the bigger portion of that. I think I'm a numbers guy. I love to look at the numbers, and these numbers are compelling, but there are changes that can happen to our culture, right? As an employer, and we see it in the private sector all the time, and we have to just be careful and think about this thoroughly. So I just wanted to point that out again.
Mr. Mayor, if I may?
Please.
Two thoughts, and those are legitimate points. Thank you. One is on employee contributions, they're always going to be 100% vested. You're going to give it to them with it, you know, it's their money. They get it when they leave. But with respect to the benefit itself, if you want to put a vesting schedule on it of some sort to keep people here for a period of time, you can do that. There's no requirement that a cash balance plan not have a vesting schedule. If you want to put a 5 or 10-year vesting schedule on it, you can do that. Secondly, one of the advantages of a cash balance plan is that people can take, in many cases, can take a lump sum benefit when they leave, like a defined contribution plan. It's also a disadvantage because it doesn't encourage them to stay. They can take their money if they want to go get it. So, as a public employer, you do not have to allow a lump sum benefit if you don't want to. You could just provide for an annuity, which is the actuarial equivalent of whatever their cash balance account is at the end of when they leave. That's one option. Or two, you could say, if you terminate employment, you can't get a benefit until some later age, 55, 60, 65, whatever you want it to be. Some retirement age. It's a retirement benefit after all, right? So you could put those kind of restrictions on it so it won't encourage people to leave to get their benefit. Just some thoughts.
There have been some concerns that have been brought to me regarding the ability to keep employees and the potential to have churn. And so, you know, you have some turnover, I think, based on my experience, is good because it keeps you fresh and it brings in new talent. In other cases, we have people that have been here 30, 40, 50 years and they're not willing to change one iota when we're trying to implement new policies, new procedures, and new protocols. But I would submit to you that as much as I love electric boat is the biggest cause or any churn that we have. And I saw that when I was employed with AECom, is when Electric Boat goes on a hiring spree, all the other local companies around here suffer. They get, because nobody can compete with Electric Boat's salary and pension plans. The entire package, there's no other contractors compete with it. So we knew, smart hiring managers knew that they were probably gonna get the rejects from Electric Boat, not meaning they were bad, they were good people, but the top guys were probably gonna go to Electric Boat. And so this municipality is probably never going to have a golden package. I'm trying to make sure we have a decent package so that we are competitive, because that is important. But we also are a public entity, meaning that we report to the taxpayers, and we have that obligation as well. So there, there's a lot. I hear what you're saying, and let me tell you something. The employees are extremely important to me. The lights don't come on by themselves. The machinery doesn't operate itself. You can't get anything done if you don't have employees. So you got to take care of your employees, and we are still trying to do that. This is not meant as an assault on the employees or anything else. So, any other questions or comments on this? Any of the panel have anything additional to say? Okay.
There was a couple of questions on the health insurance. I don't know if you want to
Okay.
go into
Yep.
those.
Because that's part of because it's pension plan and medical plan, so that's all on it.
So the questions that we had on the medical is the savings and then how many employees are in certain plans for the non-union group. There are currently 30 employees enrolled in the PPO, 10 of them in the high deductible, and 7 waive for a total of 47 non-union employees that are allocated throughout. The question was if that switch for those 30 employees was to move them to the high deductible health plan, what would the yearly savings be? And again, this is based on allocated rates. We are self-insured, so it is truly based on our own claims. But based on what we get from Anthem and the projection, the savings would be roughly $97,000 based on their, again, assumptions and their thought process. But again, we are self-insured, so we are our own pool. So it's truly based on our own claims. But that is the projected savings from the difference in the PPO, moving that 30 employees into the high deductible. I think those were the couple questions that we had on that.
Okay. Is there anything else on either the pension or the medical plan?
Good.
Deb gave us these. Are we prepared to answer these since we just got these?
I have not looked at them, so.
Okay, we just received these
Okay.
we will have answers to all these before the next meeting.
Okay.
And we will, we will get answers to you before the next meeting. I'll make sure you have these before you get your packets.
Fair
And
enough.
we will also talk to the clerk. Okay, for the record, I'd like to note that Councilor Depot is here. We are still on the topic of the pension, the medical plan. We just went through a discussion of this document that you had received, I think. And this document is maybe new. This talks about the overall, in 20 years, what the cost savings is with the breakdown of each of the different sectors. Did you have any specific questions regarding the
I
pension?
apologize to everyone for being late. We did get these, so I did go over them. The only question that I had, because I was listening live to the meeting, is did we get feedback from the retirement board?
We did.
Is that in here?
No, this was, something that's new. It was a motion that was made that the retirement board has concerns in regards to the effect that a cash balance plan may have on the health of the retirement fund that proves benefit to both current as well as future retirees. The motion passed, with the mayor the only one to go against. In favor. I don't think that that is a true statement, because a fund is truly based on what the city contributes, whether it is in the true DB plan or whether it's in the cash balance plan. And I think we kind of went over that a little bit as far as the true health of the plan. If it does have a bad year, it's up to the city to make up, and the risk and the burden is based on the city. But that did come out of the retirement board meeting, so we did want to pass that along.
The concern that the retirement board had is that when we had talked about it, we didn't talk about having it blended. We had it as two separate, and they were concerned that they would be responsible for the health of the one plan. And my response is, you're responsible for the health of all the plans. But they felt that they were going to have to manage somebody's, and they said 401, it's not a 401. They're not managing it. We would manage it just the same way that we manage our other plans. We have a company that we provide guidance. We talk to them. We provide guidance. In the past, we had looked for a 7.5% return. We dropped it to a 7.25%. We are now at a 7% return. We can adjust what we're looking for. We also rebalance the portfolio based on the performance and based on where we're at. So the retirement board is actively involved in that, and my comment to them is that what they would be doing for the cash balance plan is really no different than what they're doing for the defined benefit plan already. They're still fiduciarily responsible, although they're, from boards and commissions, they are protected from being individually sued. But we as a city, as a municipality, are obligated to maintain the funding and to, every year, actuaries come out with a recommended contribution, and we provide that recommended contribution. That's why we're at 95%. There are other municipalities that are at 95%. There are other municipalities that aren't so well. And the state has some challenges. But just because we're 95% now doesn't mean that we're not going to, that if we go to stay with the DB for the current employees and go to the cash balance for the new employees. And that's what I'm recommending. I'm not trying to change the defined benefit that has been previously negotiated. I'm talking about for new employees, this would be the cash balance plan. And you would still manage that money the same way, regardless of whether it's for one plan or the other. Philosophy is the same. Anything else? Does any other counselor have anything else? Okay, that's all I have. Thank you very much. Bruce,
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, the next line item, and the line item that you guys have waited for patiently, thank you very much, is 759 Thames Street Promenade presentation. I will turn that over to Dennis. Dennis, if you could get the microphone.
Good evening. Thank you for taking the time tonight to hear some of the recommendations that's come out of the study. Just by way of background, we went through an RFP process to select the team led by Ninigrit Partners, which is out of Providence, Rhode Island, and also included the firm of Stantec, an engineering firm out of Boston, to review traffic as well as some of the bike pedestrian aspects. We had, I think, 10 submissions overall, 10 teams, and we narrowed it down and interviewed, I think, 6, narrowed it down even further, interviewed 2 firms, and made the selection based upon their qualifications as well as their cost proposal. This is a project that is funded by CT Next, which is a funder of TRIP, Thames River Innovation Place. This project not only funded the Thames Street work, it also funded a study at Hodges Square in New London for their revitalization. But they are two separate projects, even though they're done by the same consultant firm. For orientation, so Thames Street is running through here. You got Pequannock Road and 95. The whitish area with the dark outline is what we're calling the study area. EB is highlighted only because it's, not that we studied EB, it's a very significant component to the Thames Street corridor, as well as the city as a whole. I just would like to emphasize that this is a very high-level study. There's no silver bullets that are going to solve any problems. So it identifies hurdles that we have to overcome and opportunities that we can capitalize upon. So I just want to point that out. And there is funding remaining from the grant, actually, that we will likely be able to tap into to help with implementing some of the recommendations, likely more geared towards on the zoning side of items. Briefly, on the assets that we want to capitalize upon, I think everybody knows these from living here. But the views and the orientation of Thames Street to the river, the core area, what we call the Thames Center area, which is more the historic area, is very walkable. It's understandable. It's pedestrian oriented, with the smaller buildings up closer to the street. Number of historic resources from the park, the monument, and Avery Cop House. Proximity to some of our employers. There are underutilized properties, as you know. We kind of are thinking about this as being an opportunity in that we're actually seeing small businesses that are knocking on our door. Every month there's probably 2 or 3 or 4 that are coming looking for space because they know we have space here. We've seen several of them open up over the last 6 to 9 months. And just a last note, the Waterfront Business Residence District, which encompasses Thames Street, most of it, along with the 5 corners, are designated a village district. And that was just done about 2 years ago, it's almost 3 years ago. That's a village district is a special designation under a state statute that allows for stronger controls over design for development, where you wouldn't typically have that kind of control for under regular zoning. As part of the process, there was stakeholder input. There was one night back in the springtime where we had fantastic turnout. I'd say we had about 70 people on the sign-in sheet that showed up, and there was probably more there because I was observing that some people didn't even sign in. So to point out some of the highlights that we heard from the input, that people wanted more open space and more water access, which that includes the river walks and docks, or keeping the historic core walkable and enhancing it, encouraging more businesses and small businesses. And there were concerns that people wrote in about blight or just some of the buildings that are deteriorating, and that we need to continue our efforts with addressing those. So there was 10 key findings. These are not recommendations, they're findings in that they impact the recommendations that'll come later. And I'm going to touch on some of them quickly, and then I'll get into a couple more in a little bit more detail. But the first one is there's a variety of uses and a range of parcel sizes. On the upper part of Thames Street, you got some bigger parcels that are flat, that are dry, and then when you're in more of the core, you have some small, narrow lots, and that in itself can make some challenges for any type of redevelopment. There are, as I already previously mentioned, vacant and underutilized parcels. The majority of them are concentrated in the upper Thames Street and Bridge Street areas, which I'll touch upon why that's important in a moment. So a word about the economy based upon some of the numbers that our consultants found. Since the 2008-2009 timeframe, unemployment has steadily declined, and that the growth is moderate, and that it's encouraging, and that it's recovering steadily. And then finally, this is important in that commercial development is actually cheaper to buy here than it is to build. So people will likely want to look to rehab buildings more so than build new, And that all depends on what their intended use or reuse of a property is going to be, certainly. This is a note on the environmental factors that have an influence on development along the corridor. So mainly I'm going to touch upon the flood hazard areas. So everything you can see here in blue, even extending to the other side into the bank and then continuing up, is either an AE or a VE flood zone. And all of this has implications because of the zoning requirements that have been enacted by the city, but also the requirements that are coming out of DEEP and also the state building code. And so not only are you limited with what you can do and how you can build in the flood areas, it's also how high a building is. So we want to protect views, but we also want development at the same time. But when you need to be 1 foot above flood elevation, and when flood elevation is already at 11 feet or 14 feet, you're already taking up 1 story of a building height. And the way we measure building height is from the ground level, not from the ground floor, not from the street. It's been changed. So that's almost like, I wouldn't say being penalized, but it's a hurdle that we need to look at and consider as we look at some of the additional recommendations. Something that was also noticed in our zoning regulations is that there's a number of restrictions. There's so there's 3 zoning districts: the general commercial, the waterfront, and then the general commercial again. So there's 2 in 3 different areas. Multifamily regulations, and I'm touching upon multifamily because we want feet on the street. We want to promote mixed use, and we want to promote people to live on Thames Street. But we have some controls right now in place that we need to revisit, such as how high a building is in relation to how close it can be. And then also we have a very low density. We have, I think, 4 units per acre maximum. So, in an urban area, you should be talking more like 10 to 20 units per acre. And when you look at the historical development of multifamily in the city, it's really more on the suburban style of multifamily that's happened. And that's really where our code is geared towards. It's more on the suburban side. So that's something that we would want to look at closely. And parking is a very big concern. It always has been, and it is anywhere you go. But we have some items that we need to look at changing to allow more flexibility with using on-street parking, promoting shared parking as well. And then parking for multifamily is at a very high ratio. We require 2.25 spaces for any type of unit, whether it's a studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, or 3 bedroom. Usually it's tiered. That automatically penalizes a developer because they need to provide more parking when in actuality they really don't need to. Now some of this gets kind of technical, but I'm trying to give a high level of some of the key findings that we've been finding. Another task that we asked our consultants was to evaluate making Thames Street one-way or maintaining it. So there's no specific recommendation one way or the other. So highlighting, this is the existing circulation pattern, so Thames Street over here. The green dots represent level of surface at each of the intersections. So the green's good. The red is getting to be on the poor side. Most of the intersections along Mitchell Street and Thames Street currently operate well. You start getting down into Pequannock, there are some issues down there. By making Thames Street one way, and we evaluated it with heading south. You could have also did north. We happened to just arbitrarily, I guess, pick south. We thought heading down when you come in from 95 made the most sense from a business development standpoint. What that does is it does add some more through traffic through the neighborhood, and it also starts to now impact the level of service of intersections at Meridian and up at Bridge Street. And some of the other considerations for under the current two-way system, a two-way configuration actually slows traffic, where in a one-way might result in higher speeds because it might be a wider corridor. This helps, the two-way helps to offset mitigation or mitigate congestion in the evening time. but it also provides direct access to the neighborhoods and more opportunities. There's little front door parking, where we could add more parking, and I'll talk about that in a moment, up to 190 to 200 spaces under a one-way scenario. But there's also more side swipe collisions. A one-way scenario might be able to alleviate that. A couple other items, a one-way could create wider sidewalks, more favorable for pedestrians, perhaps even for businesses. That would be there. Increased walking comfort for the pedestrian, because you are creating a buffer with more parking in some of the areas on the side of the street. And as I mentioned, it's roughly 190 parking spaces that would be added under a one-way scenario. And parking everywhere is certainly a concern, but specific to our area that we've studied, this map on the left, I know it's tough to see it, but these yellow-orange areas are all the parking areas within the study area. There's a total of over 1,000 off-street parking spaces, and with 66 of them being on-street. We did back in early summer, there was a utilization study done, in that at peak utilization time, only 60% of all of that parking there was being utilized. Now, the trouble here is most developers and property owners can't tap into the next neighbors because we don't allow it, or there's certain ways that we want it to be done currently that makes it not appealing for the development community. And this map on this side, and again, it's hard to read, but a walk shed analysis was done. The proverbial 5-minute walk is a comfortable walk where people are willing to park their car and walk somewhere. And that you can see here, there's a number of areas, 5 minutes from, I think it's where Paul's TV is, over to the Sudvet Memorial, 8 minutes from there down to the post office, 3 minutes to Thames River Landing, 10 to 12 minutes, going down to Electric Boat. But it is a walkable area with a lot of opportunities in between for people to park. So it's something that we'd want to take a look at, is how do we tap into and promote and encourage private property owners also to help and allow people to use their property for shared. So those were majority of the key findings, which led into the recommendations. And before I get into the 4 recommendations that were made, they are related to some of the work that we have going on right now, currently. So the TIF district is one of them. We have the public hearing for that next Tuesday night. We are beginning a coastal resiliency working group, which will comprise of staff and members of the community. And we're going to be looking to schedule our first kickoff meeting within the next month. The police have just completed a parking study, and our new economic development specialist, I think she's here somewhere right there, has been doing a fantastic job since she went full-time in November, and continuing with her outreach and coordination with businesses. So these are momentum items that are related, and we want to keep moving along. For those of you that are not familiar with the tax increment financing district, it is enabled by state legislation. It allows you to reinvest a certain percentage of tax dollars above a set threshold. It would be in October of 2018 would be the time that the city's TIF would actually set that. Anything above that would be realized as a investment back into the TIF district. In this case, it would be 50% of the net realized gain. And that money can be used for infrastructure improvements, supporting businesses, maintenance within the district, and even consulting fees or engineering fees for services. And here, the district is this black outlined area. It's long and linear, covers the 5 Corners area, as well as going up Thames Street and Bridge Street, where the study area was located. So the first recommendation here was to leverage the historic Thames Center. And we call it Thames Center, in that it's really got more of that critical mass and that density there. The recommendations to protect its historic character, focus on activating vacant storefronts. Pop-up storefronts are actually working with property owners to allow other businesses to perhaps advertise and create a storefront so it looks occupied and it's got a little bit more life in it. support reuse through streamlined permitting. It's something we're all working very diligently on to be proactive and reactive to people that are coming in to open businesses within vacant areas. Perhaps using the facade improvement program as part of the TIF project. Of course, address parking, which I've talked about, and I'll talk about a little bit further on. And then perhaps long-term, everybody tends to want to do it. It comes up in almost any study like this, but to bury the power lines, especially in such a dense and narrow corridor as Thames Street. The second is to create a buffer around EB. When we met with representatives of Electric Boat, when they hear redevelopment, they're concerned about higher density buildings for homes or residences for businesses. Higher buildings mean more sight lines within their grounds, their property. So they have concerns there. So we would be considering, restricting perhaps restricting residential housing altogether, or a minimum building height for office space or commercial or residential, and focus the redevelopment in higher density rather than doing something along here directly at the five corners. In our POCD, just as a note, we do specifically recommend to create a new zoning district at the intersection within the five corners to create high density, talking like 4, 5, 6-story buildings, which is something that we are exploring with the Planning and Zoning Commission at this time. Enhance the waterfront. I'll talk a little bit more about that one in a moment. I think that's, everybody, I'm sure, understands that one. And then the other recommendation is to concentrate high density development in the upper Thames Street, Bridge Street area. There's very large parcels, creates fantastic opportunities to get parking, to get higher density, both residential as well as commercial. Strategies for enhancing the waterfront, doing a more detailed analysis of the feasibility of a boardwalk, looking at the legal aspects, property ownerships, how easements might be able to be obtained, as well as the permitting. Connecticut Deep does not look favorably upon shading waterfront anymore, but that's not necessarily to say that if we were to take a closer look at it, there might be opportunities and ways to mitigate some of those. Working with businesses either through incentives or encouraging them through positive relationships to open up their waterfront and provide public access. And then I just put in construct the Thames View Park, which is the Costa property. We are still waiting. We submitted a SHIP grant to construct that project, and we're still waiting to hear back of whether or not we've been awarded it. On the upper Thames Street, so this is the Sub-Vet Memorial, looking at higher density, promoting higher density development around the Sub-Vet Memorial, actually creating a town center, if you will, or a village center, or a center or square, the town square, city square. It would be a gateway from Bridge Street as you come down to Thames Street to welcome visitors, bringing and orienting all of the buildings up to the streets to create that streetscape, and then consider the realignment of Fairview Bridge and Thames Street. Currently, there's people travel at high rates of speed, making this an actual four-way intersection. It doesn't show four-way here, but you'll see in the next slide. You can create some safer pedestrian crossing in that area. So this is what we call a test fit diagram. Our consultants were tasked with finding one property or one area to do a test fit of envisioning what something might happen. So this is around the Sub-Vet Memorial. You can see a 4 or 5-story building, which would have ground floor commercial with residential units on the floors above. With a density of, this could support 122 residential units with the parking that's in place. The redevelopment of Circle Motors, if that would become available with perhaps townhomes or other higher density residential, and maintaining views and vistas out to the river, to the bridges, and creating a promenade boardwalk along within the flood area with overlooks on the river. And this is just one scenario that was tested out, and there could be a number of reiterations or configurations of this. And certainly, this is all on private property. It would require the participation of private development. It's not something that the city can take upon or necessarily wants to take it upon themselves. And then kind of stepping back at a much higher view temporarily, looking at making some more pedestrian and bike opportunities within and throughout the city. An idea was mentioned by our consultants to do a path that extends from Sacred Heart Church, goes through the grounds of Colonel Ledyard School, which there's a bridge, existing bridge over here now, and trail along the municipal building complex, crossing Clarence B. Sharp Highway, using right-of-way of the highway and the rail to then lead out the multi-use path onto Bridge Street, and then ultimately leading to the multi-use path that's on the river. And one of the tasks of the consultant was to look at enhancing bike and pedestrian access to that multi-use path. So here you can see the existing conditions of Bridge Street, the ramps, North Street. Here's the little leak off coming off to the right. So the idea here is to actually get rid of that leak off, add a turn lane, bring people down to stop. There would be no crossing required here, where people actually come at a very high rate of speed, and might be a cyclist or pedestrian crossing in sort of a blind corner. Narrowing down lanes, so that way the crossings are narrower. Boulevard type tree-lined islands in certain locations, working to enhance on-street parking. And then this is a cycle track that comes down and through, which a cycle track is two-way movement of bicycles on a designated off-street path. So next steps. I think the TIF public hearing is consistent with some of the items that are in this plan, and will help continue the efforts moving forward. Proceed with zone changes. We are looking at 3 options of either a floating zone, overlay, or fixed district that could both be used for the Five Corners area, as well as places in Thames Street and Upper Thames and Bridge Street. Evaluating our parking regulations and multifamily regulations. We're looking to continue to engage the property owners and developers, and this includes the Five Corners area. And as the commission or council may remember, we engaged a consultant to look more closely at the Clarence B. Sharp Gateway, as well as the North Street and Bridge Street I-95 ramps intersection. That is currently underway and scheduled to be completed with recommendations later this fall, early winter. And then awaiting the award for the SHIP grant for Thames View Park. That concludes the presentation.
Council, any questions or comments?
Just thank you, Dennis, and thank you, Sierra, for putting in all this work. This is kind of an exciting plan to see that we have some sort of vision for the future. I think for a while maybe we didn't know what we wanted to do or what kind of ideas, what we wanted to bring to the city, but I liked a lot of the options that we've presented today, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Councilor Carter?
It's a general. So you had, I think what did you say, April? There were people that came out. There was like a public forum.
Well, I believe it was in April.
April.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that that people were saying when they attended that, or asking? Were they asking questions? Like I know I mean for the past 6 to 8 months we've seen the Thames Street one way, no way, those signs, and whatnot. Like what's the feedback? Like, what are people reluctant to see Thames Street go one way? Have you?
I'll be honest. I wasn't in the active area where our consultants were fielding all the questions. I mean, I know that there were concerns with people of it being one way, how that impacts flow. Some people saying maybe they wanted to have it one way, that it could add more parking. There was that. I had mentioned some others. I think most of it was the feedback. There was a lot of excitement. It was a positive energy that night. And I think overall, people are just happy to start to see something to happen, that we can start putting some strategies in place to start revitalizing the area.
So
I can address the issues on the one way.
Well, I have another question.
Okay?
As far as like development in a whole on that area, Thames Street area, Bridge Street area, and I know, I mean, people, there's a lot of people up here that are kind of set in their ways, you know? We saw that in Mystic, right, with them shutting that down. Do we see any of that? Are people excited as far as, and this goes beyond the Thames Street thing, but as far as getting businesses down here, is that something that people want to see, or is that like a generational thing, or a lot of
I think
of
that was
our older citizens, are they just kind of, okay, this is what we are, this is what we've done.
That was one of the higher ranking comments from the polls that were taken or online surveys, was to have more business. Small business was specifically mentioned in a mix of business types. So I think there is a positive. We've been talking about this. You know, it's what had impacted Thames Street the most, in my opinion, is suburban sprawl, where everybody went out to the suburbs, you know, the Crystal malls and the strip malls that happened, and so now people don't shop and do their daily business on Thames Street. So it's reinventing what types of businesses go there to get people. It becomes more of a destination, and also a local focal point too. How to exactly do that is not an easy task, nor do I want to say that I have the answer to it. It's something that evolves over time.
Absolutely.
But people get to know the area, and you're educating them about it, and you bring awareness, and that gets people excited. And they say, I never knew this.
Yeah.
Mayor and I had a good meeting with somebody about that,
Yeah.
like that. I never knew this existed, and now they're interested.
Yeah, I'm excited for it, just to put that out there. I just, you know, some people, you know, have this opposition. I'm just asking why. I don't know the answer for that, you know.
I'll address it. Some of them are here. So let me address this overall. The city of Groton, in my opinion, is we are poised for growth. We're also poised to absolutely do nothing, and that depends on what people want to do. I've talked to a lot of people, and I talk about development on Thames Street. And I will get people to say, I think we should keep Thames Street quaint, which means I don't want to do anything to Thames Street. I don't want another car on Thames Street. I don't like the water taxi people walking right by my house, those kind of things. That's a challenge. The other people say, I think we should push everything on the water side into the river, brick and steel, seaside facade. The answer is probably somewhere in between, and I don't know what the answer is. But we have an opportunity for economic development on Thames Street. And I recognize that there was huge opposition to one way on Thames Street. And some of those people are here today, and I had a meeting with some people last week, and then I went out with a Facebook post on Friday. And I said that at this point, based on what I've studied and what I've looked at, I'm taking one way off the table. Now, we have some big issues that I think one way would have helped with. For example, we have parking issues. And to get the economic development that I think we deserve down there, you're going to have businesses, and therefore we're going to need parking. So we're going to have to figure that out. I don't know what the 100% solution on that is, but when I talked to some people that night that we had everybody here, which was a tremendous turnout, but the one person I talked to said, you know, I think we're focusing on the wrong thing. Shouldn't we worry about economic development and then determine what highway structure, what path structure will support that economic development? And I agree with that. We need to get the economic development. Now let's talk about Thames Street. People come to me and they said, oh my gosh, you should have been here in the 50s and 60s. It was packed and it was, you know, it was vibrant. And we had 50 businesses down there. Now you only got 19. And I'm like, okay, can we talk about that a little bit? And so we start going through the businesses, and you got to go back to the history and understand what was going on and how we got here in order to help us figure out how we're going to get to the next step. Dennis kind of hit on it a little bit. So back in the 50s and 60s, there was a lot of urbanism, and then all of a sudden people said, you know what? We're going to get out of the urban areas, we're going to go to suburbia. We're gonna go out somewhere else. We're going to the burbs. We're leaving the cities. And then, so with that loss, some of the people were lost, some of the clients were lost, some of the businesses left. And then you had malls and strip malls and things like that. I mean, look at the malls now that are around that still, some of them are still vacant. Those were very popular back then and packed, and they took away from some of the mom and pop stores. The other thing that people forget is that when was the last time you took your shoes to be resold? Right? When was the last time you took a shirt to go get a new button sewed on? I mean, there are businesses, there are occupations that don't exist now that existed then. So we have to transition and move towards that. One of the things that I've said all along, even when I was the chair of the Community and Economic Development Committee several years ago, was bring businesses into the city that both the residents will support, and you're going to need to get people that are going to come in here and spend their money and leave. Electric Boat is getting ready to expand by 2,500 people. Now, right now, Electric Boat and Pfizer, they come in, they go to work. Some of them go to some of the mobile food trucks. Some of them go to the brick and mortars, and then they go home because we don't give them a place to spend their money. I want to fix that. But it's going to, the people that have been in opposition to one way, and I understand it, in most cases it's an emotional issue. In some cases there are some business things that are driving it, and I recognize that, but I'm going to ask for your support. I'm going to ask for you for that energy and passion that you have to help get me, the council, and the city of Groton to the next level. Get us to where we need to be for economic development. Right now, Garbo's is gone, but there's a company that's working to buy that and buy those two properties together. I am working with a restaurateur, and they may be working with somebody separate, I don't know, separately, but I have introduced those guys together so that we can get a restaurant down there on Thames Street. And then right adjacent to that, what used to be the Lower Costa property that is now called Thames View Park, that we have a $1.4 million SHIP grant. Once I get notified that we're going to receive that grant, I'm going to be coming to the Freeman to ask for 375. What's my, you remember my matching? 350, 375. To ask for a matching grant and need to get the Freeman's authorization to get that money. So I'm going to ask for $375,000 to get $1.4 million. And I'm going to try to convince you that that's a good deal. And also, what it's going to do is it's going to get me an 8-slip dock for 26-foot boats there. And it'll get that lower property redeveloped. It'll be ADA accessible. There'll be amphitheaters. It'll be electrified. There'll be some water there so that we can fight fires if we need to. We've just got DEP approval. DEP recognizes that if our plan gets approved and we follow the plan, we will be the first anybody in the state of Connecticut to have an ADA accessible kayak launch. Right? Is that close? Am I making that up?
East Line has one.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm going slow on this. You're going to back.
Maybe on Thames River, the first one.
I thought you said the first one in the state. That's not what Mike said. Okay. Well, anyway, you won't have to count very high. We're going to be in the loner. But anyway, so what that will do is that will give us an anchor on the south end. Okay? And if we had a restaurant there and we're trying to get Electric Boat as part of the customers there, one way would not support that. So that was one of the drivers. There's other drivers too, but that was one of the drivers. The other thing is looking at the north end, what can we do? If you go down and you walk Thames Street, I'm not talking about driving it, because if you drive it, you're going to mess stuff. I'm talking about getting out and walking on the sidewalk and look at what's there. Okay? There are some great opportunities. There are many houses that are already there that are being improved their marinas and their docks are being improved. I'm okay with that. I want to keep that. I don't want to tear those down. That adds to the ambiance of who we are. There is no reason why we can't embrace the historic nature of the city of Groton, embrace the Avery Cop House and the Mother Bailey House, and Ebenezer Avery and the fort. Embrace those things, but also embrace the future and embrace water-dependent uses. Look at boardwalks. Look at what can get people here, because the residents, there's not enough residents here to fully support the sustainability of shops down there. I have people, do you guys know, well, never mind. I have people that want to come here, and they are waiting for me to get the first spark, so that, because nobody wants to be first, but I have a lot of people that want to be second and third and fourth. So we're waiting on some people to come in so that we can do some sparks. We have some challenges there. We've had some blight challenges, and we've taken a turn on blight. We have some challenges with some property owners that are resistant to either let go of their properties or to make the investments in order to further enhance Thames Street. But we are working with those guys. They're not actually partners yet. We're working with them to make them partners so that our visions can align. But there are things that are happening. We're also looking at Five Corners. We're looking at what we can do at Five Corners. There is some potential development that may happen there in the future. So these are things that are going on. And I'm going to need support from the residents in saying, yes, we want to do this. Because if the city of Groton says, you know what, we don't want any of this, we just want to let it go into whatever it's going to go into and just be like it is, if you guys are happy with that, we'll do that. I'll be very unhappy because that's not what I want to do. And I'll focus on the north end, I'll focus on the south end, and we'll let the middle languish. But I don't think that's what people want. But I need support, we need support, and we're going to need support in the future for initiatives that we're trying to do. We are actively talking to developers, and once we get the TIF master plan and the, what's the other thing we're doing? We're getting TIF boundaries?
The district announced.
Thank you. The TIF district approved, and the master plan, which I have expectation we're going to do in September the 3rd, then that'll be the first step. That'll be another tool in our toolbox to move forward. But again, in case you missed it, I want to be very clear that I do not intend, and I'm not saying at this time, I'm saying I do not intend to pursue one way. When I did my Facebook page, originally I said I wasn't going to do one way for economic development, and after I had somebody look at it, we decided to take that out because somebody might say, ooh, but he's going to do it for something else. I'm not looking at one way. Okay? Now, if there are people that are 100% for one way, then you probably ought to get out there and we'll have a discussion. We'll have the no way, one way guys and the get out of my way guys have a discussion. We'll have a debate. But right now, there's no debate for that. Plus, with what I've looked at in the plan, I think we can get there. Parking is going to be one of our biggest challenges. But we can get through that. Good?
I'm all set. I
Go ahead. I'll quit.
I mean, I think that is our biggest challenge, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So, I don't know if, I mean, me personally, I don't know how you can totally throw out one way unless we have a plan of where we're going to put cars. I just,
Well,
because he said it's going to add 195 spots if we did that, correct?
he said it could.
It could. Well,
Well,
it's going to add spots.
you said 190. The Netagret guy said 140 something.
the ballpark. No, it was in the ballpark of 190.
Okay.
Mhm.
Dennis, can you go to slide 24?
I just don't know
I'm sorry.
how you could have one and not the other, huh? I mean, unless you're saying.
No, understand.
building a
That
garage
one.
or something.
Just past it. Yeah, I mean, when I look at this, and I saw so much yellow, I couldn't even believe my eyes. But then, you have a line in here that nearly all of the underutilized parking is privately owned, right? I mean, I walk this every day. There's no place to park. We put up new no parking signs on a lot of the other the side streets to prevent EB people from parking there. What are we gonna do? How do you get there?
There's no, and I'm from the area, I'm from Groton, raised in Groton, and I know some young business owners, I know many actually, and one of the biggest thing they say is, well, nobody wants to invest in somewhere, there's no parking. So I don't know how you can get business down here and then do it the back way when the people that are potentially gonna invest in a space, in a property, and there's no way to put their I don't know if I'm saying that. If you guys are hearing what I'm saying, but it's, I don't know. I think maybe do we know that some of the potential business owners or the people that are potentially going to invest into the city or invest in any properties, like what they're looking for in a property? Do we know that? Because if they're saying that they're not going to invest, and I know a small business owner that just he's occupying a space down the street from my house, and he doesn't have parking. He utilizes another business to park, and his customers park somewhere else, and that's a small business. So I don't know.
Councilor Depot.
Well, I think that to the point about parking, it would seem that's part of the reason we want to make the whole thing more walkable also.
Mhm.
So I think, I don't think there's one silver bullet solution for the parking issue. I think that I think a lot of the ideas in this plan are very interesting because I think that they mitigate that being such a problem. And it encourages business development to not create more parking problem by, like, a couple of the examples show, easier parking or, ways to move the building so there's more parking on that same lot maybe, or I think I think it's gonna be a creative solution, but it's not gonna be just one solution. It'll have to be a mix, which is, I think, the whole point of that.
I recognize that parking is going to be a challenge. It is. But I also think that we are creative enough and smart enough that we can rise to that challenge. And one of the things that we're looking at is our zoning requirements for parking currently may be overly restrictive. I don't know that they are or they're not, but we are looking at those. We are still looking at those, right?
Yeah, if I can just comment on that. A few things that pop into my mind that I think need to be explored is that if somebody wants to use parking on somebody else's land because they don't have enough or any room at all for parking, that other person that they might be able to strike a deal with is they would have to have a deed restriction on their lot that says forever in perpetuity you need to provide X number of parking spaces to 18 Thames Street or something like that. We ran into it 6 months ago, 7 months ago. Landowners don't want to deed restrict their property, but other communities are doing it, as long as they have a contract in place, and they have a contract. We require a special permit just to use on-street parking, which is time and expense for a small business that just wants to get in there. They got to do a public hearing process, and they only need like 3 or 4 parking spaces. It's like we should be getting away from doing that. The other thing is this is a mixed-use environment, which means people are going to park, go to a restaurant, and maybe go someplace else afterwards. So it's the park once scenario where that restaurant or that little other business, small business, shouldn't necessarily need to meet our 4 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. Maybe it's 2 parking spaces per 1,000 because the other person that needs 4 per 1,000 would only need 2 per 1,000 because now you're getting the 4 per 1,000 for the 2 businesses because they're going back and forth to each other. So those are the types of things that we need to, and there's probably a lot of other scenarios that are out there that we need to start investigating to help. And the other is engaging the property owners that own some of these large lots. trying to come up with a structure that would perhaps allow public parking on their lots designated, and that other people can utilize that as well. So that certainly would have some challenges, and will take some time, but that's something that the mayor and I have talked about that I'd like to start exploring.
No, I was going to ask him that very same thing, because, reading this again, there are 66 on-street spaces and 1,026 off-street spaces. Most of those are underutilized because they're privately owned. I just wanted to know if we had a plan, but it sounds like you have some sort of approach in mind for approaching those property owners. Okay.
Anything else from the council? Okay. It is my prerogative as the chair to allow for citizens' comments. And if there's, well, first of all, is there anybody signed up? Dennis, can you look real quick, see if there's anybody? We have,
Marge Burns was the
Okay.
first person.
You actually answered my question, was about the stores that have been vacant so long on Thames Street, because you said you were working with those people, so.
Okay. Sam Spano is the next person.
okay, go ahead, Sam, I'll let you go.
Just,
If you could state your name and your address for the record so that we have it.
my name's Sam Spano. I live 300 Thames Street. Just to be, I'll use the term crystal clear here on this one-way, because I'm seeing a little bit of debate going on, and based on our meeting Wednesday, you said, and I quote, "We're not going to pursue one-way," and that is the case here, correct?
That is what I
It's
said, and that's what I said tonight.
No longer open for discussion, correct?
Council, you guys going to discuss it? If you're going to,
I mean, my opinion, the mayor's the mayor, his opinion is his opinion, so he can't speak for me. But that, we can leave that to a different time.
Councilor Depot?
I mean, what it looks like, in the beginning it looked like a good idea. The numbers don't seem to bear out that the benefit of that would outweigh the disruption, and it wouldn't be benefit enough to do it. So in my mind, that's the direction that we've gone, at least for me. It doesn't seem to make any, it doesn't seem to benefit enough. So
We didn't
for me, it's a
discuss it
non-issue.
though. I'm saying that we didn't discuss it, unless you guys had a discussion without me. Did you,
I didn't discuss anything.
that's my,
It has not been brought up here
That's all
to
I'm saying.
discuss. It was part of the discussion that was there.
okay, that's all I'm saying. It may lean to that way, I'm saying I was never in discussion, that it was off the table, that's all I'm saying.
Well, that's why I'm kind of, just want to be crystal clear on the point, because,
Well,
largely because.
Make your point, Sam,
Right,
because I think we need to hear it.
Yeah, we have all sorts of signs up and down Thames Street, and all the businesses and whatever, we've started to take those signs down, the one way, no way, based on our meeting on Wednesday.
Yep.
And I have to make the decision as to whether tomorrow to take down the rest of those signs. And,
Or
so
put
that's.
the other ones back up, right?
Or put the other ones back up,
I
correct,
understand.
exactly. So that's why I'll use the term crystal clear again. And, my understanding was at the beginning, prior to this presentation, you were gonna get up and state that you were no longer gonna pursue one way, and then I see during the presentation that it appears to be still, it was actually in the presentation, all still, as if it was still on the table.
That was just the product of a study that
Okay,
we did
yeah, I
earlier
just,
in the year.
yeah, but anyway, it's still in the presentation. So anyway, for clarity purposes, we're not gonna pursue the one-way, is that correct?
Can I? Just
Councilor McKay?
Just to give you my take of all of this, I think based on the study, it opened up the conversation one-way versus not two-way. At this time, Mayor Hendrick said that we're not gonna pursue it. I think he's saying that this is not something that we think is the best course as the mayor's office, maybe. Not that I wanna speak for the mayor's office.
No, it's okay.
I think that if there were citizens that came and said, hey, we really want one way, and it was a strong contingent, I think we would be obligated to listen to those citizens, just like we're listening to you. So I think we're not pursuing it, but you can't 100% say
So
I'd
you
never
put it off the
open the
table.
discussion again, because if people were,
That's where I'm coming from. You know, we got
We
the
have to listen to everyone.
presentation, but there's also people, like, we haven't had it. If we were to say that it's off the table, and then we got an influx of people saying, oh, we want it one way, like, that's kind of unfair to the people that there's two sides, you know? And we represent two sides as well. At least with me, based off of a study, at least for me, that's not enough to say, okay, it's off the table. Now, if we have a discussion, which we should have a discussion before we say it's off the table, then we can take it from there.
Well, we're an account, we can have a discussion. Here's the situation that we have at hand. In case you haven't driven Thames Street in a while,
I live
there
there.
is a ton of no-way, one-way. Now, frankly speaking, I think it's a couple people going around knocking on doors and put this sign up. Now, here's the issue. Is the community at large committed to this? Don't know, don't not know. But based on what I read here, the study that I've read, and the things that I've done, I'm not convinced that one way is gonna fix the problem. We have problems. If you go one way, you're gonna have some problems. If you don't go one way, you're gonna have some problems. But right now, I had somebody that had second thoughts about coming down to Thames Street because of the no-way, one-way signs. Because they said, if the villagers are mad, I'm not gonna start a business down there where they're mad. So this is, like I said, when I started out, this is an opportunity. We need to figure out what we wanna be when we grow up. And we need to decide, what does the city wanna do? And maybe we need to have that discussion. And maybe that needs to happen more. But we had the discussion when the contractor was here that Thursday night. There were people that were here, and a lot of that input is what was in this handout. Councilor McCabe.
I was here that night, and I was at the board with the one-way, and they had the study up, and I was talking to the consultant, and they said to me, I'll be honest with you, a lot of places that move to the one-way swap back and go back to two-way. So I don't know. I thought that was pretty telling itself, that people don't necessarily want it, and it doesn't always turn out the way you were hoping, so.
Councilor Carter?
Yeah, I'll be crystal clear. I don't know what the best scenario is. I don't know if one way's best or two ways best. I just want the best opportunity for everybody here. And what I'm saying, to ask me personally, not to speak for him or the rest of to say that it's off the table, okay, I don't feel comfortable with saying that. I need more. I want to have a discussion. We didn't have a discussion. I'll just put that, we did not have a discussion based off this. We didn't, okay? If we find another, like, my major thing is the whole parking thing, you know, because I've spoken to people, it's parking, all right? And if there's another solution, all right, let's talk about it. Let's put it out there, you know? But to say that we're just totally going to just get rid of the notion of one way without having another solution, for us to revisit it, say, a year from now and 2 years from now, when there is no other solution, that makes me look like a liar, you know? And I'm not going to do that until we talk about it and come up with feasible other options or different ways to make Thames Street flourish. And that's just where I'm at. I'm not saying that I'm for it. I'm not saying I don't know. I don't have enough information. I think before we say that and make a statement like that, I think we need more information, not just based off a study. Let's get another solution to see, is there other plausible places to get things needed to put business down there. That's
So
what I'm
what
saying.
information do you need to satisfy?
I don't need any information. Before somebody tells, I mean, because me personally, as a councilman, right? Regardless on how you feel, right? I can always revisit it myself, right? I can always say that. So that's what I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I can always say, all right, let's revisit one way Thames Street again. That's all I'm saying. So the correct thing would be, in my opinion, I can't speak for you, but in my opinion as a mayor, I'm not doing it, or it's off the table. But I'm just saying that they have a film and I have a film. Like, I don't know the simple way to put it. You guys will speak for me.
Right. So I'm gonna say something like I agree we have an approach. I think Dennis has an approach to a solution. I think the study says that one way has downsides, right? Some downsides on the traffic and choke points. And I'm willing to see out these new approaches, but I'm not going to say it's off the table indefinitely, right? I think it's fair to say right now that we have other approaches to try to tackle this problem, and I think we should see it through, see if we can get there a different way.
Councilor McCabe, you had a comment?
I was gonna basically say, I heard at least one approach is the rezoning of spots. Talked about having, we have no parking signs in EB, maybe that would be no parking up to 4 PM. And that way, in the evening, we have restaurants, people could park there in the evening, those kinds of things. So I think we've had at least one thing mentioned as an alternative to the one-way. And we certainly should go down all of the avenues available.
All right, so where are we? Right now, I am still committed to the initial stance that I took, that we're gonna go down this path. Now, can I guarantee you 100% for the rest of my life, put my firstborn dog on the table, that kind of thing? Something may happen down the road. I'm telling you right now, I'm going down this thing where it's no one way. Okay? But if you and I have had this discussion before about parking and other issues, if there are things that I can't get economic development down there and one way is the issue, then we may have to come back. But let me tell you something, we will have a vibrant discussion. Right now, I am committed to the plan that we presented today and that Dennis presented. I recognize that there is some one-way statements on here because that's what the contractor did was they evaluated one-way and two-way, and they said, here's the advantages, here's the disadvantages. And then at this point, like I said before, like I said in the beginning, and like I said on Wednesday when we met, I am taking one-way off the table so that we get economic development. I recognize I'm not ever going to have, probably not always going to have 100% consensus from the council, and that's okay. It doesn't mean anybody's right, anybody's wrong. Sometimes you have to make the decision and live by that decision. Okay? It's what I get paid to do. Sometimes it's a good day to be me, and sometimes it's not a good day to be me. Haven't decided yet today. Okay? But I recognize that, and Councilor Carter and I will have discussions, this council will continue to have discussions about economic development on Thames Street. Because let me tell you something, it took us years to get where we are. It's going to take us a little bit of time to get out of here. Right? This is not going to come in overnight unless we get a sugar daddy that comes in here, or sugar mama, somebody comes in here with hundreds of millions of dollars and said, hey, we're going to fix your problems. I don't see that happening anytime soon. So we have some work ahead of us. That's why I asked for people's engagement. I ask you again for your support and your help in helping move the city forward and getting strong economic development down on Thames Street. Did that answer your question?
Yes, so, or, just to clarify, so as mayor, as your mayor,
As the mayor,
you are not going to pursue the one-way?
that is correct.
Okay. You answered my question, thank you.
Councilor Carter?
Yeah. No, it's not for you. But so is this a plan? You said this is a plan. This isn't a plan.
That is what you're holding, I think, is a presentation from tonight. There is a document that was sent out to the council
Mhm.
a while ago that is the plan, it's also available online.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
The plan?
Right, and the
Okay,
approach for
yeah, okay,
parking,
okay.
alternatives for parking.
All right, I thought he was talking about the presentation that he just said. Okay, gotcha.
Okay, is there any other discussion on this topic? Okay, Jay? Would you like to speak? If so, you're gonna need to come up to the mic and please come, you don't have to sign in. Come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, please.
Okay, my name is Jane Cloquet, and I'm at 380 Thames. And the presentation was about the analysis of changes to Thames Street. So one of the issues is economic development, but and then parking was a concern vis-a-vis economic development. But one issue which I was surprised was not raised was the safety of driving on Thames Street. And I'm not, it's kind of, to me, it's not a one-way, two-way thing, whether we have one-way or two-way. But when we're looking at making changes to Thames Street, and we're looking to change traffic patterns or to change how we're going to, if we're going to widen streets or whatever, if they also would look at the safety. And we have three particular, maybe even four, difficult areas that I would just like to request that Ninigret Associates take a look at. One is Paul's Pasta. In front of that it is extremely dangerous there. And I go down Thames Street every day, and you have to stop in front of Paul's Pasta if somebody is coming the other way, because people are parked in front of Paul's Pasta. So on one sidelight on that is, I've talked about this with the police department and the highway department and the owner of Paul's Pasta. And the owner of Paul's Pasta said that before they had made changes, before they redid Thames Street and put in the sidewalks and everything, that the double yellow line used to be closer to the east side of the street. And so it meant that the bicycle lane on that side was smaller, but having moved over, there wasn't a problem with people parking in front of his restaurant. And I would really like to see that changed. I think it's a minor change which could easily be done, which would help alleviate congestion there, traffic and safety. The other one, of course, is, I don't know if anything can be done about it, but it's in front of, well, it's where the big wall is, and it does like a...
Yeah, it's a serpentine between
Yeah.
between Broad Street and School Street.
Right.
A little S-curve.
There's an
You're between
S-curve.
a rock and a hard street.
Yeah, right.
Actually, you're between a rock
And a wall.
the river.
Yeah. And we have one pickup truck which parks there all the time. I imagine he probably lives there in front of it. And so if there could be, you know, you're talking about different options for coming up with creative solutions. If there could be a solution where that fella could park somewhere else relatively close by, Puffins or someplace like that, so that it doesn't cause a real bottleneck there. The third one is, I don't know if there can be anything done about that either, but it's right between Garbo's and Command Technologies building, where you have people who come from EB, they go around the corner, it's a blind corner there, and if anybody's pulling into the driveway, my driveway that comes up to my house, then they're slowing down to pull in on the driveway that faces Thames Street. Then they get rear-ended, or there was a crash there because somebody's trying to pull into that parking lot, and they got someone who was behind them crashed into them. So I don't know if it could be widened there, or they have to put signage up, or whatever. And then, of course, the fourth one is by Bridge Street, which where sometimes people come by a little fast, but that's not too bad. So those are my concerns. That if we are going to look at Thames Street, that we should also look at the safety of driving on Thames Street, which then impacts the people who walk. We have an increasing amount of walkers, I'm delighted to say, on Thames Street, and by making it a safer place to drive, then it's better for pedestrians, residents, and hopefully businesses.
Sure. I had a renewed conversation this morning with the police chief about that S-curve and illegal parking there, and also about Paul Espasa, and he's going to look at that, about what that's marked as far as parking, and also I'll get Tim Ummers, the Public Works Director, to look at the road, where that is there. And then Garbo's and Bridge Street. Garbo's, I didn't realize that was an issue. Bridge Street is just people going quickly around that corner.
Great.
Council, anything else? Okay, that's it for this. So we are done with the Thames Street Promenade presentation. The next thing is 742, Groton Utilities. We have several. Are you guys okay, or do you guys need a break? Do you guys need a 5-minute?
Nah, I'm gonna power through it.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I know, yep. Thank you for your perseverance, all of you. I'm gonna go on 742. Okay. All right, the first one is, this is the only, okay. Resolution that the mayor and council authorize Groton Utilities Management to issue a purchase order on Earthlight Technologies LLC, 92 West Road, Ellington, Connecticut, a state preferred contractor for the purchase of material and installation to convert fluorescent fixtures of the remaining facilities audited to the new light emitting diode LED technology fixtures in an amount not to exceed $77,068.49 to be paid from funds available in the Groton Utilities Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative Reggie Fund, the amount remaining from Phase 1 LED lighting upgrade project. All right, there he is.
I'll try and lighten the mood here.
All right, go ahead.
With LED lights, you've seen one or two other resolutions, or some of you have seen one or two other resolutions come through very similar. Regional Reggie is money that's available for reducing your electric load as a utility. It's for reducing the greenhouse gas emissions made by power plants. So as we reduce our load, we generate Reggie credits. So we have an account at CMAC that has money in it. We've been using those for LED lighting upgrades that continue to reduce our load across the city, whether it be in fixtures, Cobra fixtures over the roadways, or in our buildings. We've been upgrading LED lights. The last phase of the LED upgrade project for the municipal buildings is this. And it's, in this building, it's to finish all the LED lighting in this building, which should mean that the garage is done, operations is done, all the basic buildings are done. There could be some outliers, say at the substations or other spots, but we're just putting in new LED lights when the other ones go bad. That's what this purchase is.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, I need a motion, let me make sure I have the right date. Second? September 3rd. Yeah.
Wait, isn't that
Although that's gonna be,
Labor Day?
No, Labor Day's
the second's
Next
Labor
Tuesday.
Day.
Oh.
Third is, well, here's what the third is. Third is our TIF, not open house, public hearing, thank you. Public hearing. It is our joint meeting, and then after the joint meeting, we go into council. We have a joint meeting with town council. What's that?
It's the first I've heard of it.
Okay, it shouldn't have been, but we'll work on that. There's a joint meeting here with the council, and then after that, we will have our own meeting. So it could be a long night, so we'll need a motion to move it to the 3rd. Either move it to the 3rd or we move it to the 16th. Ron, how,
I don't see any issue with either. I'm looking at Ron because he knows.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think
too.
of the lead time and how far that's gonna put the project back. I'm not really sure what that is.
The lead times on this, once we issue the purchase order, which there's no rush to do, but we don't order the lights until we issue the purchase order, there's 4-week lead time there, and it's gonna be 2 to 4 weeks to finish.
So that's the only question I
I mean,
have.
So 8 weeks since,
my,
so that puts us in December, worst case,
yeah.
right?
I'm looking to put this with the other ones too. None of these are time critical that 2 weeks is gonna kill them one way or the other.
Well, the tree trimming one, but.
We can just keep invoice approving separate for the moment. But they're true to price right now. If you're good
So-
with that.
It'd be nice if we could get them all through on September 3rd, but I don't know how. those
Okay,
get
it's up to the
Maybe
council.
we can look at the agenda when it's.
I will, whatever we need to do, we need to move this to a meeting. That meeting can either be 9/3 or the meeting can be, 9/16. But
So we think we know for certain we have a joint,
we have a joint meeting. Well, hold on, let me give you the specifics. 6:30 is the public hearing for the TIF master plan, and I think it's 7 or 7:30, we have a joint meeting, and then we immediately go right into our meeting, our council meeting right after that. Which, the one thing that will be on will be the discussion and the approval of the TIF master plan. So that's one motion. This would be an additional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 motions. I mean, we could probably step through them fairly quickly if we discuss, deliberate, and debate them tonight.
Okay.
It's up to you guys.
I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll need a motion to move it to 9/3.
So moved.
second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. The next one is to renew Groton Utilities water chemical contracts. Actually, I just normally just read that, right? I don't read the whole motion.
You don't need to read that.
Because these motions are very wordy today. All right, so it's to renew the Groton order for water chemical contracts. Director G'day.
Several years back, we did 6 different water plant treatment chemicals. So that's basically 6 pricing agreements that we have in contracts, that there were several extensions available. We did not have a resolution that had us accept those contracts with extensions. So we were correcting that as we reviewed them, issuing the purchase orders this year. We decided to put through a resolution that picked up the extensions on the contracts, and then simultaneously, the only purchase order that we're going to be issuing that meets the purchasing requirements to come to council is one for $93,500 for lithium polyaluminum. which is included in this. All of the chemicals are budgeted. All of the pricing was justified in bids previously. They're all vendors that we have been using for, I believe, 2 years already. Ron, did you have anything to add?
No, like you said, it was just bid with a multi-year contract, or went as a resolution last time, it only awarded for the 1 year, so this is just a follow-up.
Any discussion from the council? Hearing none, I need a motion to move this to the mayor and council meeting of 9/3.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. The next one is change order number 7.
Change order number 7 includes, I believe it's in your package, 7 different items. Some are positive changes to the large WH White construction contract. Some are negative changes to the contract. Altogether, they work up to a negative $12,000 when you add them all up. The WH White contract is a $45 million contract. It started at about $44 million, and it's been change ordered up to a little over $45 million. This, whether it's positive or negative, it adds to or subtracts to the contingency amount in that contract. We currently have used, out of the $4.7 million contingency, we have used about 1.9, leaving about 2.5 million, which is 52% of the contingency. So for today's discussion, we're discussing a negative change order.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I need a motion to move this to mayor and council meeting of 9/3.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. Bosra Light and Power Tree Trimming, you just go ahead and, all those, these are 2 separate resolutions. Let's discuss them together and then we'll move them together.
Yes, we basically bid tree services because altogether, GU and Bosra Light and Power spend about $1 million, about $500,000 with each company. Bosra Light and Power's budget is slightly less than the $450,000, but in Bosra, they're doing a couple of capital upgrade projects, and when they upgrade the wires on the poles, very often part of the project is to cut the trees back so that they can access the wires safely. So that, Ron checked the budget separately to make sure the numbers were good. They fit the budget numbers perfect. This is actually a feel-good bid in that we have been using Asplin for quite a few years. They maintain their pricing with us, and they have only very incremental cost of living updates. What do you call it?
Just annual increases.
Yeah, they're small. They're
Oh.
1% to 1.5%, and they've been towing the line. So they actually bid the price that we're currently paying. They didn't go up or down, and they beat state contract price. So it was great. They have a great safety record with us, and we're very glad that they won.
And this is part of our, for both Bosra Power and Light and for Groton Utilities, part of our aggressive tree cutting campaign that we have that allows us during storms to minimize the power outages that we have due to downed trees. So any discussion from the council? I need a motion to move these to mayor and council meeting of 9/3.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstention, motion carries. And that's it. Okay, thank you. All right, we're gonna go to 748, which is the,
Football league.
yes. So they are requesting a donation. The amount, we could do any amount, but one of the things that I initiated this year, because I was concerned about, what happens is we have organizations that are double dipping, and what I mean by that is they'll ask GU for a donation, then they'll come and they'll ask the council for a donation. And while there's nothing that prohibits that, you know, we like to keep track of our donations and make sure that we're being fair with the distribution of funds. So I talked to Dan Bogues, we've looked at it, and we are coordinating, when we receive a recommendation for contribution. When we got this one, I asked Ron, Director of Finance, Ron Uhas, to run some numbers for me, and that's where this thing comes from. This is the Mystic Falcons football. What we do is we have a relationship with them that started way back before 2005, but our records go back to 2005, where on fireworks night, they rent out the parking spaces at Washington Park. And then they get half the proceeds and we get half the proceeds. So the numbers that you see there in front of you are the numbers that they get. And the reason I wanted to bring that up is that that is donation money that is going to them. Just like when the Little League runs the concession stand, we own the stand, we own the equipment, we provide the electricity and water, and they get the profits from what they sell. So we do that with the Little League group, we do that, and the Little League group hasn't come back, except one time they came back to utilities for the Calvin Burrows field for lights. Is that?
Yeah, we did have golf tournament.
Okay, okay.
And there's a donation for lights or something.
But normally they do not, and normally these guys do not. So I'm not saying don't give them the donation. All I'm saying, I just want to make sure that you're aware that, oops, where'd this come from?
Can I say something, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I just
with
want
the
to,
ground mystic thing?
so for this year, they collected $1,042. That was it. Go ahead.
All right, so the individual, she's, I went to school with Mrs. Oliver, and she had approached me on a personal level, but she knows I'm on the council, but I also have a tie with Groton Mystic, obviously, and she had asked me what's the procedures as far as coming to the council, and I said, listen, I don't know where we're at as far as the city funds, but I said I don't think there's much, but I definitely request it, and then she said, well, I was told to go to GU, right? And I said, well, yeah, that's really two separate entities. Go ahead and go to GU, right? So I think as far as the two proposals, it wasn't meant to double dip. It was meant to, if say we only had $200 left over here,
Sure.
go to GU and see what they can provide, so it wasn't meant to be a double dip. And as far as these numbers here, they do a good job. It's all volunteer based, right?
Sure.
They depend on this, so they do this yearly, and they depend on this, okay? This is what this is, so they depend on it just off the rip, right? What's going on with the league is that, and this is all around, not just with Groton Mystic, right? The cost to run a league is made the same, is either the same or it's gone up big time, but you gotta pay refs the same rate or even more, lights cost more, everything costs more, but there's less players. And the registration fees are less. So it's either, they're stuck with either charging a family $150, $200, or finding other ways to get donations.
Sure.
So this is where they're at now, and this is where all the leagues are at too. So it's really kids aren't playing sports anymore. This is baseball, soccer. It's not just football, but the football numbers around here are like none. And the only alternative is just to, like I said, you're gonna beg somebody or ask them for them to pay $200 for their son to play football and their daughter, or probably two daughters, for $150 a piece to share. That's kind of so they're trying to come up with good ways to raise money.
Sure.
This is one of them.
I did not mean to imply
I know that.
this submission was malicious.
I just want to make it clear. That's where it came from.
Okay, or that other people are doing it maliciously. What we're doing now is we're orchestrating between the two so that one or the other provides.
I got you.
Provides the thing.
And I do. If you can say, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I know that they take the, like you said, they take this, I think this is the first time that Groton Mystic has come in a forum to ask our council
I
for
think
money,
you're
right?
correct.
And I just want to point that as well, you know,
Sure.
that's just a clear sign of just the times, of where the league is and where it is, so.
Sure.
Alright.
Councilor Depot.
My feeling on it is until we have to start turning people away,
Yeah.
I don't see any harm in it, and I don't think we've hit that point.
Okay. So we're in a new fiscal year, so we, right?
This starts July 1. Just the only thing that I'm going to say with that, and this is something that we've all struggled with, I think you guys council members have too. What happens is we start out coming strong with the first one that comes in, and then towards the end, we kind of look at the big picture and go, okay, we only have 500 less to roll, we want to do 250 because we want to kind of save. So we're just starting the new fiscal year.
Right.
This donation can be anything, but just kind of we have been
Well, I
receiving
said-
more over the
I
years.
assumed
as
it, see, I
things-
assumed it was gonna be coming out of the last part, that's why I
Right.
said there
Yeah,
was,
no.
that's why I said, I don't
Sure.
think there's much left.
No,
but,
no,
yeah.
first, I appreciate the extra context. The other thing is, Director Uhas is right, that come May, we've got scholarships and senior this, and, you know what I mean? There's a lot,
Sure.
that we should consider too. But I don't have a problem with making a donation.
Okay. So, council, what level of donation would you like to go with on this?
Seeing how it's, we just had this 1,042, maybe lean towards the more conservative side, like a silver.
Councilor Depot?
I, in regards to what Councilor Carter said, while we can make a donation, is there a way that we can help them maybe increase their enrollment numbers? Maybe that's something that we would be able to do.
No, I don't think it has anything, I mean, Groton Mystic has been here for years, so people know what it is. I think it's just, it's the whole, I mean, we can go studies, this is in general, numbers are dropping, and like I said, it's not just football, it's baseball, everything else, you know? But they're dramatically dropping in football, but that's just because of obviously the head injury
Right.
stuff.
Yeah, the
There's
contact
nothing
sports.
that we're gonna do on our behalf to make Groton Mystic known. I mean, people know about Groton Mystic.
Right, but I mean, like, I don't know how much it costs. I don't know how much it costs. When I was a kid, I didn't know how much it cost to do it. It's
Oh, so what do you mean?
cheap.
To help
Like,
get
now I
kids
know,
there?
and it's cheaper than I would guess that it.
No, but I don't know what you mean. Do you mean as far as getting kids there?
Yeah, well, because you're saying, like, they have to increase costs.
No, I
So-
said they would have to increase costs. I said if they don't get donations to do the things,
Right,
like if they
right.
don't do a walkathon, if they don't, you know, they come up with an ingenious way of even having parents sit and do the donate their time. You know, you give $20 at the beginning of the season, and if you don't donate your time, Groton Mystic gets to keep the $20. You know, and there's a lot of parents that don't donate their time, so they get to keep Groton Mystic. So it's just other
Sure.
things that they have to do. If
Right.
they didn't do that stuff, then price would be
Sure.
would be more. I'm not saying that they keep raising it. I'm saying that they
Right.
just yeah.
Would anybody be against just making it an even 1,500? Which would match 15, well,
So you
total,
give
right?
them 450?
Right, like, yeah. In order, because I think that's,
Oh, going
That's
with the
good.
gold, is that what you're saying?
right, I mean, just giving them I mean, we'd have to cut another check, but it would make our total for the year $1,500.
Mhm.
Would we be okay with that? I know that's a little
I
wonky,
think
but
they'd be accepting towards anything.
sure.
Well,
Yeah.
right.
And that matches like
And-
the highest number that we have on here.
Well,
as
what you can
record.
see there, if you look at this season, and go back to the years, you can see the years we had clouds and fog and rain,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Because we didn't have a lot of people coming to the fireworks. But our resolution for this talks about City of Groton has established a community development and beautification fund which accepts both designated and undesignated donations designated for the development and beautification for city, and whereas the city council may from time to time wish to make donations to support the social, cultural, and educational interest of the city of Groton, and whereas each fiscal year $5,000 of undesignated monies in the Community Development Beautification Fund shall be made available for the purpose of making such donations, and whereas requests for donations shall be made in writing to the mayor and shall include the amount requested and explain how the request benefits the social, cultural, or educational interest of the city of Groton, and whereas the funds kept for donations should not be used to increase expenditures of individuals, organizations, clubs, or agencies that are funded by the town of Groton. However, the city council shall have the discretion to consider such request, and whereas the amount of the fund designated for donations should not be used for routine budgetary needs, and whereas no request shall be for more than 20% of the amount kept for donations, and no individual, organization, agency, or club shall make more than one request in a fiscal year, and whereas the request shall be voted on by the mayor and city council, and whereas this resolution shall replace resolution 02-2-4, therefore be it resolved, mayor and council establish policy for funding and granting donations. That's the current resolution that we have approved. So this falls under, because our kids, city kids, are part of
Right.
this program.
But,
So, and if you do 450, that 450 does not exceed the $1,000, because this money was raised by them
okay,
through
so
another.
the 5,000 doesn't include this 1,000?
No.
So it would be just the 450?
Right. Correct.
Okay.
So what's the will of the council?
I'm okay with it. I think getting them to, like, again, it would give them the one of the highest numbers they've received in the past. It looks like almost 15 years or so.
Okay.
So
I'm all in.
Okay?
I agree.
In that case, I need a motion to move this to the mayor and council meeting of 9/3.
So,
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
aye.
Now, in my excitement, we need to go back to 392. I don't know where the council is with the pension and medical plans on the handbook. Do you need additional information, or are you ready to move this to the mayor and council meeting for vote?
Ready to move it.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Well, you were ready like 2 times ago. You've always been ready.
You know that?
I'm okay with, no, I'm good with that. I'm the master of the obvious.
I'm ready, Mayor.
Okay, then I need a motion to move this to the mayor and council meeting at 9/3.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Sorry, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstention? Motion carries. Okay, hold on. We have an executive session. I know it's not on here, but
Let's see, you know this.
so I need a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to Connecticut General Statute 1-206 Alpha to discuss personnel, the fire department, to include council, the chief, and chief, who you bringing with you? Anthony Bear.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We are in executive session. We'll go to C8. There is no action coming out of this.